Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Aaron Hale, and this is Point of Impact. Have you always been interested in getting into Airbnbs, but don't think you can afford it and wouldn't know where to start, even if you could? My guest today is showing others how to do it. Kirby Atwell is showing people how to get into Airbnbs. Well, that's not quite accurate. Short-term rentals is a little bit closer to the definition because Airbnbs is like calling short-term rentals. It's like saying an adhesive bandage is a Band-Aid and tissue paper is a Kleenex. Airbnb might not be the only game in town, but it is kind of the standard. Well, Kirby Atwell is a former Army officer, West Point graduate. He's a family man and father of 3 young kids, and he's found a way after transitioning out of the military to live off rentals. And while running a short-term rental, Airbnb is not a passive pursuit at all. Hospitality is very much an active investment. Kirby has found a way with the right systems and people in place to make it as passive as he possibly can. And he's got 21 units and the financial freedom and the time now to contribute to others. In fact, he's teaching with his podcast and his coaching how to live off rentals. So if you're interested, he's showing others how to find, finance, furnish, and operate their very first or next short-term rental. So you can tune into him, Kirby Atwell, and his podcast, Living Off Rentals. Before we get into the conversation, which I had a whole bunch of fun talking to, I always do, please give the show 5 stars, leave it a review, and share with somebody you know or appreciate it. It'll do me and others a great service. And without further ado, my conversation with Kirby Atwell. Kirby, my friend, welcome to the show.
Aaron, it is awesome to be here. I am a huge fan of yours. I've shared your story with so many people that I know, and you've had such a major impact on my circle. So I appreciate you having me on.
You know, same here. The feeling's mutual. I am a huge fan of your YouTube videos, the Facebook group, your podcast, especially because, well, for one, you and I are in similar niches, just different geographic areas, but very similar in our investing style. But also, you put out some fantastic material, lots of education. So I love doing like that. I think maybe once or twice a day, I send a message to my wife like, you gotta see what Kirby put out.
Awesome.
Before we get into all of it, though, how was Taryn and how are the kids?
Oh, great. We just got back from a homesteaders conference last weekend, so we're learning about adding more animals to our little farm here, and it's like her dream. So the kids are loving it. Everything's great.
You are in northern Indiana?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, we live in Valparaiso on 45 acres.
Yeah, you got a farm going there. And is that where I love this thing, the barn B&B is?
Yep, exactly. So I'm standing in my office, which is in the same barn, and then we have 6 guests right next door right now in that share a wall. So we turned about 800 square foot of this huge pole barn into a barn B&B, and it just has been killing it in terms of rentals.
Okay, so that was a pole barn.
Yeah, it was 55 by 65 foot pole barn.
That's fantastic. That's so fun. In fact, that was one of the for example, I when you put out the video about the conversion, I sent the video to the link to my wife. I'm like, I want a barn. So yes, like I said, a huge fan. But tell me, Kirby, you have mentioned also in the past about this dichotomy between uh, wanting autonomy and wanting to make an impact. And sometimes, I mean, it's a balancing act. Sometimes one is sacrificed by the other. And sometimes, if you get it right, they work together. Can you explain a little bit more about that? And how does one find autonomy and make an impact?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So, for us and for me, I started out after the Army. I started out flipping properties for 5 years. I flipped about 70 properties around the Chicagoland area, and it was great. I learned a lot, but at the same time, it felt like this little hamster wheel that I was on, and I wasn't creating any cash flow. I was just creating actually more and more hustle. So my reward for hustle was more hustle, and I felt like I was on this treadmill I was never going to get off of. So um, eventually I got married and had someone more wise come into my life, and we started planning out our future life together. And so as we were doing this, we were talking about, okay, we're not really interested in just making a bunch of money. We started to talk about what do we want our life to actually look like? Because that's where I think you should start. Not like I want to have $1 million someday. Like, who cares? Like, what are you going to do once you get $1 million? Figure out what you want your ideal days to look like. So we started doing that, and we realized that we wanted a lot more control of our time. We wanted autonomy. We wanted to control our calendar and be able to spend lots of time with our family. We're starting a family, and now we have 3 kids. And so that was like the first goal then that we talked about. This is back in 2016. But then as we started to explore this idea of getting to autonomy and getting to financial freedom, then the question came up, so what's the purpose of that? Like, what's the purpose of life? Is it to get to a point where you can just sit around and do nothing? Or, once you get there, then what are you going to do? So then we started to think through, okay, actually the purpose is to get to a point where you can control your time so that you can have a big impact, which I know is the name of this show, Point of Impact. And so it's ironic that it coincides with that. But the whole point is that these two things can conflict with each other. If you want to have a big impact on people, sometimes that takes up your time. And if you want to have total control of your time, sometimes that would impact the amount of impact you can have, because you're not really doing a whole lot then if you're just kind of sitting around and not putting anything on your schedule. So I think it's so important for people to be able to get to a place of autonomy. Financial freedom typically is what helps get you there. But then figuring out what type of impact you want to have once you get there. And it's a constant balance then once you get to that point.
So what are your ways of giving back and making an impact?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's what we kind of thought through as we were figuring this out, and like, what do we want to do once we get to financial freedom? So about 2.5 years ago, we got to a place where we could both leave our full-time jobs because we had created enough income through these non-traditional short-term rentals that we were buying. And so I've always been super interested in real estate. And so I wanted to create some sort of path that people could follow to do similar to what we had done, create some autonomy in their life so that they can have some margin to be able to do the things that they want to do. And so I created this program. It's called the First Vacation Rental Investment Blueprint Program. And it is a step-by-step program that walks people through steps of finding, buying, and setting up their first high cash flowing short-term rental. And it's so far I've worked with about 200 people in the program, walking them through this process. And now people are coming back, who joined 2 years ago and now have 10, 12 of these properties. And they're telling me it totally changed their life because now all of a sudden they don't have to go to a 9-to-5 that they hate every day. They control their time and they can do the things that they've always wanted to do. So So it's some of the most fulfilling work that I've done. And that's where I actually spend the majority of my time now, because our 21 short-term rentals are pretty automated. We have really good systems in place to automate the day-to-day operations of those.
That's great. And I really do want to get into those a little more about the specifics of how you operate yours and where you found them and all of that. But it was a little bit more on the impact. I was thinking as you were talking about, making an impact. Now, I remember a fundraiser. I was at, this was just after I was injured, went blind. I was giving a keynote at this fundraising event, and the room was full of affluent people. And there was an auction, and at the auction they were doing this like celebrity chef, cooking event in somebody's home, and these people around the tables were just cutting checks for $20,000-$30,000 for these, and they were like, people shrugging their shoulders like, this is for charity. And then of course the brilliance of the auctioneer said, would point at the runner-up, the first place loser of the auction item, and say, if we can get a second one of these, would you match the winner price? And boom, doubled it. But besides that, these people were just cutting tens and $20,000 checks without batting an eye. And I thought, I want to get to the point, I'm still in uniform. I think I was still active duty at the time. And I thought, what do these people do? How do they live a life where they can, get to that point? And I want to do that. And just like you, I love real estate, and I have found that secret sauce, right? You find a niche, and you find something that's repeatable, and then you do it over and over again. So tell me, what is your real estate investing methodology?
Yeah, such a great question, and that's such a great illustration of that point of figuring out, okay, let's think through what these people are doing to maybe we can replicate that. I think my whole methodology is based on the concept that I think people get the whole savings and investing strategy wrong typically. So the vast majority of people who follow the traditional financial planner planned out strategy of saving for retirement and investing it in a 401k or IRA or just in mutual funds, the whole point of that, if you think about it, is the thought process that you're buying something today that's going to be worth a whole bunch more later on. And hopefully you're going to accumulate enough to where when you leave your job at 65 years old, it's going to support you the rest of your life. And a lot of people start that process thinking, well, yeah, but I'll accelerate it and I'll get to financial freedom early. If I can just save a whole bunch more money, I'll get to financial freedom at 35 or 45 or whatever their goal is. And in this program that I was talking about, the people I'm working with, I thought it was going to be a lot of people who were younger and wanting to accumulate cash flow. But what I found is that the vast majority of people I've worked with are people who have followed that traditional investing path, and now they're 40, 45 years old. They're doing really well. I mean, they're working, a lot of people I work with are super successful. Doctors working at big tech companies, attorneys, engineers. But what the place that they're at in their life is now they're halfway through their career. They've worked super hard, and they realize that now they're on this path that they have to just continue working until they're 65. They haven't been able to save their way into financial freedom. Their lifestyle has grown with their savings, with their salary, and so they haven't spent time with their kids like they wanted to. They haven't been able to travel. They want to do other things, but they're trapped in this system that was designed to get them to a place of retirement at 65 and live off that. So my whole philosophy is based on the thought process that I think it's sort of a waste to invest a dime into building net worth or equity instead of focusing all your investing capital on building cash flow until you get to a place of financial freedom. So if you have it, if you're going to be investing $100,000, you can put it in your retirement or mutual funds, and wait for it to accumulate, or you could put it in a cash flowing asset that's going to pay you $1,000 or multiple $1,000s per month if it's a really solid short-term rental. And now you're that much closer to freedom. And if you do that, replicate that just a few times, now all of a sudden you can go to work because you want to, or you don't have to anymore. And you've got assets that are going to support you for the rest of your life. So if you do that at 35, now all of a sudden you've got 30 years that you just freed up of your life just by accumulating a handful of these cash flowing assets instead of putting it into these things that you're hoping someday will be worth a whole lot more down the road. But it's not giving you any freedom in your life. So
isn't that the chicken or the egg though? I mean, when it comes to cash flow, don't you need some equity? You need some capital it's like buying like a dividend portfolio. You need to dump a ton of money into, you need a couple $1 million worth of dividend stocks before. So how do you find, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but even when it comes to real estate, for cash flowing, you actually accumulate like long-term rentals, you need quite a few doors before you can get that cash flow.
Yeah. So my investing, what I personally, and I've gone through almost every type of investing out there in real estate over the last 12 years, did a lot of flips, did, wholesaling, did long-term rentals. What I've landed on is these utilitarian style short-term rentals. So they're in very affordable areas, very low-cost areas, typically throughout the Midwest and Southeast, outside of larger cities, but still have access to a larger city. And you can buy these properties for a fraction. So the same property probably in the downtown area would be double or triple what you can buy at 20 minutes outside of the city. But the nightly rates, if you're buying in an area where there's local draws and there's any sort of population, typically the nightly rate might only be 10, 20, 30% less than right downtown in the city. So the ROI and the cash flow on these properties is just mind-boggling in some cases. And I also focus on small multi-units. So you get 3 streams of income on one low-cost property. And so the cash flow is phenomenal. And like you mentioned, you need, most people think that you need a lot of money to get started. But if you're buying in a low-cost area, there's tons of cash flow coming in. We do a hybrid approach of what's called a DSCR loan, which covers 75% of the purchase. And then we bring in a private loan to cover a private lender to cover the other 25% at a high, they're making 10, 12%. But because the properties make such a great income, you can still pay both those loans, both the payments on those loans, and still cash flow in a lot of cases, several $1,000s per month. So it's a really great tool to get you really efficiently to financial freedom.
That sounds excellent. In fact, when you mentioned the small multifamilies, I remember you talking about super listing. Can you tell me what that's about?
Yeah. And I think I stole this from, I'm trying to remember who it was, but the concept is such a great idea. But I think he coined the term super listing. So we bought, like, our most recent deal. I'll give you the actual numbers on it. So we finished up a few months ago a triplex. We bought it for $105, and it was absolutely disgusting. The basement was full of raw sewage. There's a broken sewer pipe down there. Like, hadn't had maintenance done in 20 years. But they were all occupied. It was in rough shape. So we gutted the whole property, put $220,000 into making it really, really nice. So we've got $330,000 into it. It appraises for $365,000. And the net income on this property is around 6,000 to 7,000 after all our expenses each month, renting all three out as short-term rentals. But the way we boost income in the summertime in our busy season is that it's based on the fact that there's not nearly enough properties that will sleep these large groups. So you get a group of 16 people that want to travel, because you got, in the summer, it's like friend groups, grandparents, adult kids, their kids. And so you can either rent a mansion that sleeps, that many people, or our place, even at $1,000 a night, it's pretty affordable if you're splitting it 3-4 different ways between these families. And so it'll sleep that many people. So we can charge a premium for the super listing where we rent all 3 units together. And then in the winter time, we got the versatility of renting the individual units when it's typically couples or small groups traveling for weekends or long weekends.
Yeah, we're working on a very similar project. In fact, it was equally as nasty when we got it. But when we're done, it'll be 2 4-bedroom houses connected by a pool. We'll convert just 5-car garage into partially into a 3rd unit, and we're even adding, because there's a lot of land, there's like an acre and a half. We're going to add a couple RV pads with some privacy hedges. So lots of ways to maximize the earning potential.
Oh.
Plus, it, like a multifamily, those things, they're almost never completely vacant or unoccupied. It's making money somehow, even with turnover. So I love that idea. And but how do you find these? How do you find these properties, these projects?
Yeah. And one other just comment on what you just said too. The other cool thing is that if things change, because a big concern of a lot of people is, well, yeah, short-term rentals, it's kind of the wild, wild west. Rules are always changing. What if another pandemic happens? People aren't traveling, all that stuff that people worry about. Well, with these small multi-units, they work fantastic as short-term rentals, just cash flow like off the charts. But you could also convert them back to long-term rentals, and they still work, because you've got multiple units. And so once you add up the long-term income, you're still cash flowing. So you're not going to lose your property like you would if you had $1 million cabin in the woods, try to rent that out on a long-term basis. You're going to be upside down heavily on your cash flow. So, but yeah, to answer your question on how to find them, the great thing about these, there's so many advantages, in my opinion, to this strategy. But we find the vast majority right off the MLS. And I know that sounds like when I switched from flipping to this strategy, it sounded like that's crazy. Like all I cared about before was equity. So it was just all about these off-market deals that, and doing these big rehabs. We can find, like the one I described is a big rehab, but we'll find turnkey properties in these lower cost areas. We're in northwest Indiana. Michigan City is the main town that we invest in. So it's a lower cost industrial town, very affordable. And so a turnkey property might be a few $100,000, and it cash flows amazingly well right out the gate. So again, I'm not as concerned anymore about building a ton of equity into the property right from the start. I'm concerned with freedom. Like our goal switched from, trying to turn these properties quickly to, we're going to hold these for the next 20 years. I know 20 years from now, it's probably going to be worth double. But in the meantime, if it pays me several $1,000s a month, every single month, up until then, I can live off that. I don't really care if the property goes to 0 tomorrow or it's worth double tomorrow, because the cash flow is really what I'm concerned about. That's the freedom number that allows me to have complete control of my time.
So you're less concerned with, say, the BRRRR model, or buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat, where you're fixing it up to add value and then refinance out.
I do the
And,
BRRRR.
and then you're,
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I do the BRRRR model just because it opens up the aperture for more deals. So I'll do rehabs, but I'm not as concerned about building in as much equity. Like I'll trade equity for if I find a great deal like the one I just described, the triplex that I know is going to pay me $6,000 to $7,000 per month. We created equity by doing that rehab, but what I was really, even if we had no equity in the property, knowing that I'm going to make $6,000 to $7,000 per month on a property that cost me $330,000, that's what I was most concerned with properties.
So you're just looking something that fits your buy box. So the criteria on the MLS that's ready to move in, or turnkey. You furnish it and finance it with a DSCR, which I mentioned before. That's a loan that's asset based, and the down payment with a private lender. And do you finance the furnishings, or does that come from where does that come from?
Yeah. In a lot of cases we do. So, like everybody runs out of their own capital at some point, so even if you've got a bunch of money for a down payment for the first property or the first three properties, when you get to your fourth, you're going to need some additional capital for those down payments, the furnishings, the closing costs. So that's how we kind of stumbled upon this strategy where we can get these DSCR loans that are asset-based loans that cover the majority, and then we go to the private lender for the down payment. Sometimes it's the down payment and the furnishings and the closing costs and the rehab. It just depends on the deal and how much capital we have available personally. So we invest our own capital sometimes, but the vast majority of the time it's a combination of a DSCR loan and private capital that fund them.
I consider it when using my own capital. What's my payback time going to be? That return on cash. So after all debts and maintenance and expenses and all that are calculated, what the cash flow is back into my pocket, and how soon that cash flow will match the capital invested, so I can, or if I'm going to refinance, and that's a lot. That's why I like the BRRRR method, because in 4, maybe 6 months, I can refinance and restore all of my capital plus if I'm investing my capital, but replenish restore everybody's investment capital. But if it's with a turnkey, I want to know that cash flow is going to restore any capital invested in a short time.
Yeah.
But backing up just a little bit, when it comes to financing, I'm not sure, did we explain what a DSCR loan was?
I don't think I kind of brushed over it a little bit, but these loans are awesome because when I first started in 2011, when I got out of the Army, I started flipping houses because these loans just didn't exist. The only option for a 30-year fixed rate loan was a conventional loan that was based off your W-2 income. So about 4, 5, 6 years later, along came DSCR loans, and they've really grown in popularity. And like you said, they're an asset-based loan. So when I go to get a DSCR loan, as long as the property that I've found cash flows enough to cover the payment, so it's called the debt service coverage ratio loan. That's what DSCR stands for. So the debt service is your payment that you're making on the loan. So as long as the asset covers the debt payment, that's where that term comes from, then they'll issue the loan, and there's no limit to the number you can get. So they won't give you 100% of what you need. They want to see you, either get the capital somewhere else or have it personally. But they'll cover 75 to 80% of the purchase price on these properties. So it's an amazing tool.
Absolutely. We're refinancing into a DSCR loan on one of our properties in Akron right now. But
Nice.
That's one of those for value add ones where we fixed it up, turned it into a cash flowing. it actually cash flowing very, very well. I think the ratio is something like 2.75. Yeah, so it's pretty good.
And most people would say Akron, who's going to vacation there? Why would you buy a short-term rental there? But those are some of the best places that work way better than the beachfront properties and the cabins in the wood in a lot of cases.
Well, I was looking at your portfolio, the channel manager, your dunedwellings.com,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reading, and it said beachfront house. Wait a second, he's in Michigan's. There is this lakefront there, and I was confused because I live on the Gulf, and then our properties are in Akron, Ohio, and it's pretty landlocked. But you had these beachfront properties, and it confused me for a moment. But
we think of
it also got me thinking about.
Sorry,
another. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say we think of Lake Michigan as the third coast here, so that's why we say beachfront there.
I thought I was on the third coast, but that also reminded me of something you mentioned before, was about the economy of scale and where and how you invest. And it's a little bit different than some of the other military real estate investors' methodologies where they PCS and they'll move from duty station to duty station. They'll purchase a property while they're there, and when they move to the next duty station, they just keep the house and rent it out, and then do it all over again, setting up these properties in different locations all over the country, sometimes the world. And you do it a little bit differently. You keep them all in one location. And what's the benefit there?
Yeah, good question. And I think that strategy can work. I think just buying real estate in general, people, I talked to them 10 years later, they're like, that was the best thing I ever did. So just buying real estate makes sense. But the thing that I've realized over the years is that a lot of those people that do that, they just hold on to the property that they owned before. It can become a big lift for them to manage because they're all over the place. What we decided to do early on is we decided let's spend the time up front, get really intentional about the absolute best place for us that's going to help us achieve our goals. So our goal was financial freedom. So where is the biggest ratio or the best ratio of highest nightly rate and occupancy compared to lowest purchase price? And so we identified that area, and then we decided to go deep on that area to get to a place of financial freedom. And by doing that, all our properties are within a 5-minute drive of each other. And so we use the same cleaners, we use the same handyman, we know the rules in the area, we have great realtor contacts, we know the city inspector. We don't have to build, like a lot of people want to own a vacation rental in 10 different places that they can visit, which is great in theory, but now you have to build that whole team in all those 10 places and track what's going on in those places. And it can be a management nightmare. So we self-manage these based on systems, even though they're 20 minutes down the road. I haven't been to many of them in over a year because we have a great team, and there's such great economies of scale. Our cleaners, when they go there, they can clean 3 properties in a day, which they love. And so we get a cheaper rate because they can do so many more properties. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel in every location. So I know there's also the downside of that is all your eggs are potentially in one basket, but I think people try to diversify too soon. So we got to a place where we have 21 of them here in Indiana. Now we're starting to build some down in Florida, which was kind of the second phase of our plan. So we'll have another location down there in the in a warm temperature where we can visit in the winter time when we don't want to be in Indiana, which is always one of our long-term goals. But I think doing that too soon and spreading yourself too thin is a big downfall for a lot of people.
I don't know. I think I'm like a reverse snowbird. When it gets starts getting cold here, I like to go north to Evergreen, where my family is, and really experience the cold. Maybe it's my Viking blood. I don't know, but um, that's great. In fact, when you said keep it on one basket, just reminded me of Warren Buffett's quote where he said, "Put all your eggs in one basket, and then watch the basket."
Yeah.
And but it's right. It's when you talk about when uh, anybody's talks about talks about investing in stocks or whatever, the first word on everybody's mind is diversification, right?
Mhm.
Now it's avoiding that single point of failure, and though we can't mitigate every risk, uh, we can mitigate those single points of failure by watching the basket. So you don't have to have properties all over the country or in very many different markets. You can have them all in one market, so long as you're you're watching that market, you master that market.
Yeah.
But that's that would be one of somebody's biggest fear is what if uh they that one town, that one market puts in an Airbnb law or
Hmm.
anti-Airbnb law.
Yep. That's a good question. And to your point too, with diversification, if you're not looking to self-educate yourself and you have no idea about anything when it comes to finances or investing, then yeah, diversify, because you don't know, you don't have any competitive advantage. But if you're willing to put in some time and learn the concepts, then put your money in the thing that so I've spent the last 12 years in real estate, learning every single day. I still learn. And so it would be really crazy for me to diversify into stocks and diversify into areas that I don't know, just to, because I have this huge competitive advantage in the area that I've researched and in this strategy that I understand. So, but that it does bring up a great point. Like, what if the rug's ripped out from under you, and all of a sudden city council comes in and changes the law, and you can't do short-term rentals? I that's why I'm such a huge proponent of having a great backup plan. Every time I think through a real estate deal, I think through, okay, what's the absolute worst case situation with this property? So, like the triplex that we just bought, if all of a sudden city council tomorrow changed the law and we couldn't do short-term rentals, well, it's probably going to go to 30 days minimum. So there's a big midterm rental market in this area. A lot of people coming in for work or nurses and stuff like that. If I can't do that, then I would probably rent it on a long-term basis, furnished, because I've already got the furnishings in there. So I could bump up my monthly rate because it's furnished, and rent it on a long-term basis, and the property still cash flows really well. So I'd lose cash flow for sure. All the properties would cash flow less, but there's no scenario where I'm not still making pretty decent cash flow. If long-term rentals no longer work, we got a bigger issue on our hands. But that's sort of the backup plan. And so I think eventually diversifying, like we're buying in Florida now, as sort of like our second part of the plan. But I think just doing that too soon, it can be a big distraction for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and like I said, reinventing the wheel. Every new place you purchase a property, you got to develop those relationships. You got to hire and manage the handyman and the housekeeper, contractors. If you're, so it's compounding the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell from your educational background is in finance. I'm sure you're read The Intelligent Investor, and it was about the diversification part. Is if you're not going to learn your market or that chosen field of investing, it's good to diversify, because you don't need that level of education. It's averaging out. What was it? It would I forget how it was put, but it was basically you're mitigating risk by increasing mediocrity. essentially.
Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, you're not going to get that level of return
Mm-hmm.
from the efficiencies. You're not going to from the economy of scale, and just simply knowing in that market what a good deal is and how to really maximize that income potential. And you built up a 21 or the individual. You said there's multiple, so these are 21 doors or 21 rental units, some of them in the same property, and that freed up your time, your efforts, because before you are doing this grind with the flipping and other investment methods. So what did you start doing with this newfound freedom, this autonomy?
Yeah. So that was the whole impetus behind starting this program. So I've been running my podcast, Living Off Rentals, for man, it's been we're coming at, well, you're actually the 200th episode that's going to be released here in about a month. So so we've been doing it for a little while now, and a lot of people were reaching out who listened to that podcast saying, this is great information, but can you provide something that's more step by step to kind of take us through the living off rentals process? Like, how do we get actually to a point where we're living off the rentals? And so that's when I created this program after I left my full-time job 2.5 years ago, and had the capacity. All of a sudden, I think people really underestimate the things that they can do once they leave their full-time job. A lot of people have this goal of like, I got to get to $20,000 a month until I'll feel really secure to leave my full-time job. And what I tell people, and that was kind of our thought too, like we waited too long. We could have left our jobs sooner. And what I tell people is that's the starting point. Like, don't wait until you've built up 3 times as much as you need to leave your full-time job, because now all of a sudden you've just freed up 40 plus hours a week of capacity. And most people who are willing to put in the work to get to that place of building up that cash flow are somewhat ambitious. They're not going to sit around for 40 plus hours a week and do nothing. So, our goal was to get to 8 of these, and that would be enough to replace our income or get close to it. And then from there, it was relatively simple to follow the same process and get to 21 within the next 2.5 years. But to answer your question, that with the freed up time, because it didn't take a whole lot of time to build up the portfolio from there, I created this program to help other people along that same path called the First Vacation Rental Investment Blueprint. And it's just been awesome to work with others to do the same thing.
That sounds incredible. So you're helping others, not just with the podcast, but you've also got the YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
and you're doing, I guess, explainers and instructionals, as well as posting your podcast on the YouTube channel. But you're also teaching through a course and some coaching.
Yeah. So it's kind of a hybrid of, it's a step-by-step program that they get access to that walks them through exactly how to do it. But then weekly, I do live Q&A/coaching calls where I work directly with them, and I'll go through deals that members of the program are considering buying, just to make sure before they pull the trigger, they're not getting themselves into anything that is going to be, a painful experience for them. And then any questions that come up throughout the process, I'm there to answer as well. So I personally work with every single person who is in the program, but we also have a step-by-step process laid out where they can work on their own as well.
That's excellent. So making an impact in many different ways. I think it's fantastic. What is the future vision for Kirby and the Atwell family?
Yeah, I mean, this program is a big focus of mine right now. I think, especially with real estate, there can be a tendency to have shiny object syndrome. And, as soon as something starts working, you see, oh, well, this guy's doing this type of thing and this guy's doing that. And so I try to avoid that in the way that I avoid. Yeah. the way that I avoid that is kind of alludes back to what I talked about in the beginning, is getting super clear on what your ideal life would look like. And so the more clarity on that, I feel like the there's a direct correlation with the level of happiness that somebody has, because it's very hard to work toward some goal, or, even if it's like a monetary goal. Like I said, like, what happens once you get to that monetary goal? If you haven't laid out what you want your actual life to look like day to day, that's very difficult. So for us, we are fortunate. We feel like we're living our ideal lifestyle. Like, we wanted to own some land. We want to grow our own food. We want to have some animals here, be able to spend a ton of time with our kids. So we're doing that, and it's a process. It's not like a destination that now we've got there and everything's good. Like, we're continuing to improve upon that on a daily basis. So from a personal standpoint, we'll continue to do that, and then from a professional standpoint, I just want to serve as many people as possible and show them this path to freedom that can allow them to really have their own impact on the world. And so I kind of split my time between those two things, and that's the vision.
That's excellent. I love that. Also, you're teaching others how to get into short-term rentals. And do you have any worry about, say, market saturation? Too many Airbnbs being on the market.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different nuances to that. So just in general, I think returns on short-term rentals, if you're buying a solid short-term rental, you can't touch those type of returns in any other sector of real estate investing. You're not going to buy a commercial building that gets you 100% cash on cash return. But I can go out and buy a short-term rental in a relatively affordable area that gets me 100% cash on cash return. And so, that type of return, if it's that high, it's probably not going to be sustainable forever. Like, there's going to be more and more, it's going to draw more and more people in because it's so attractive. But it's got a long way to go before it is anywhere close to what the long-term rental returns are. It's significantly better. So I think we've already seen in these mainstream vacation rental areas that have been so popular since the pandemic, like, the mountains, the quintessential cabin in the mountains. It's like high end, has all the amenities. There's so much competition for those that you have
here at the beach.
Yeah, or the beach. Yeah. You've got to be the absolute best property in that area now to attract this small pool of people that can actually afford those. And the only reason somebody stays in those is because they're on a high-end vacation. That's the only use case for it. For our types of properties, we call them utilitarian properties because we'll still get vacationers, especially in the summertime. That's when everyone's out of school and they're traveling. But we also get workers, we get people going to funerals, we get people going to visit families. Like, any reason that somebody might travel and stay in a hotel, they would stay in one of our properties because they're very affordable. So you've got such a bigger pool of potential guests that we have not noticed any dip in occupancy in our market. And we've seen the same thing with a lot of utilitarian markets. So I think over time, there's going to be more and more that come in, and the returns will get tighter. I think the best ones will always get booked up. So it pays to do it the right way. But I think there's a long way to go before it gets to a point where, it's on par with a long-term rental or anything like that.
I remember somebody mentioning, I don't remember where it came from, but somebody said that that you see one of those major hotel chains somewhere, a hotel, it's a major corporation. They do the research before they put up one of those huge buildings and furnish all those rooms and hire the staff. And so anywhere you see a hotel, even if it's not in one of those prime vacation locations, like maybe Michigan City or Akron, Ohio, or Walla Walla. I mean, it's you see a hotel, they've already done the research, and there's enough transient traffic or tourism travel, or who do traveling nurses, professors, students, parents visiting, graduates, hospital personnel, or maybe even patient visitors that need a place to stay. That there's lots of reasons somebody might be going to one location or another, but the hotel is a great giveaway that it's at least a good sign that a short-term rental will work there also.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the cool thing about these more affordable areas is if you think about it, like to build a hotel, it's kind of expensive. And so, they've got to charge a certain nightly rate, which has gone up across the board with hotels quite a bit. But if you're buying in a nearby area to where these hotels are, but you're buying in a pretty affordable area like we are in Michigan City, we can buy houses and rent them at a lower nightly rate for an entire house or a 3-unit property for sure at a lower nightly rate than the hotel can charge just for a hotel room. So we have this advantage over the hotels. It doesn't work that way if you're buying, in California in a very expensive market where, you need to charge a significant amount to support your mortgage and all the expenses that you have. It's hard to undercut a hotel in that market, but in these affordable markets, you've got that competitive advantage over a hotel.
That's a great point, because this worked more when before the interest rates began to rise, but for long-term rentals, a good rule of thumb was the 1% rule. If you can rent a property out for 1% of the purchase price, or if you're doing a rehab, 1% of the total project price, project cost, purchase and rehab, then you have a pretty good chance of at least being cash flow even or cash flow positive. And it's more of just a fun litmus test, but it doesn't work very well anymore with the interest rates, but being what they are today. But here in the Gulf Coast of Florida, the Emerald Coast, purchase prices are you can't even get 1% in short-term rental with the beach houses. Those vacation homes, the stereotypical ones. You can't get 1% with short-term rates.
Wow.
So it's I know you've mentioned this in the past, that those big mega mansions on the top of a mountain, on the ski slopes or at the waterfront beaches, they don't make a whole lot of sense right now, except if your play is for appreciation. Like you've already said, you're a cash flow kind of guy.
Yeah.
As far as appreciation goes, have your properties appreciated, or is that even a factor? Do you care, or do you utilize any equity build up in the properties to purchase more?
Yeah, it's a great question, because Indiana is not known for its appreciation potential. So, right after the pandemic, the year or two after the pandemic, 2021 and 22, I was questioning my strategy. I was going, man, all these people seem like they're getting rich overnight buying these properties in these coastal areas or these, the mansion on the mountain. But I always had in the back of my head, like, what happens if something changes? The cash flow makes sense today, but what if something changes tomorrow? Like, what's their backup strategy? And I could never answer that question. And so I just stuck to my modest properties that were low cost, high cash flowing, and have accumulated some really significant cash flow since then. But at the same time, we have had some appreciation. It everywhere has appreciated over the last 3-4 years. So it hasn't been as significant as like coastal areas. We've gotten some appreciation, but like I mentioned before, if my net worth was zero for the rest of my life, like if all my properties were worth exactly what I had into them in terms of my mortgage payment or the debt on them, so I had no equity, no net worth whatsoever, I would be financially free till the day I die based on the cash flow that's coming in.
Well, that's excellent. Sorry.
No. So I'm just saying, like, that part of it, people get so wrapped around the axle around building net worth because I think it's sexy to talk about. But at the same time, that's not going to pay your bills, and you're not going to be able to live day to day off of the equity in your property.
I think it's fantastic. It's a great way to consider your finances in general. If you've got a solid way to make an income and it's passive, more or less, and you've done a great job of setting up the systems so that the hospitality is definitely not passive, but so long as you've got the systems, the business, the people in the right places, then you can make it as passive as possible and focus on building that portfolio and like what you're doing, educating others on how to do the same. So before I let you go, I want to ask if anybody can learn, if it wants to learn more, contact you, get into this program, where can they go to find out more?
Yeah, great question. So I do master classes from time to time on topics that I feel like there's been a lot of questions on in my community. So I'll put together a 60-minute, 90-minute master class that kind of just goes deep on a certain aspect of my strategy. So those are posted at livingoffrentals.com/start. So if you go to livingoffrentals/start, there's a page there where you can put in your information and you'll get access to the most recent masterclass that I did. So I just did one a few weeks ago, or actually last week. And it's just I'm going through in detail how to buy 2 properties in the next year that create $5,000 of cash flow on a monthly basis going forward between the 2 of them. So that's the most recent one. If you want to check it out, it's a great intro to my strategy, and yeah, it's probably the best place.
Fantastic, and we'll put that in the show notes. Is there anything I missed? Anything you want to share? Anything that I didn't ask that I should have?
One more resource that I love that I'll share is a book. I'm a big fan of Greg McKeown. He wrote Essentialism, and then he wrote Effortless. And I read Essentialism many, many times, and then Effortless came out, I think, like 2 years ago, and I've read it several times since then. But in Effortless, he talks, the whole premise of the book is around this idea of linear success or income versus residual income. So, a lot of people live their life focused on this linear where, the effort I put in today is rewarded today, and then I start all over tomorrow. But if you can start to shift your mindset and start thinking through, okay, how can I do things that provide a residual return or a residual success or residual income where the work I do today pays me into perpetuity, which again, kind of goes back to the model I've talked about the whole time here. But you can do that with real estate. You can do it with, just tasks around the house. You can do it with your personal life, relationships. So how can you put in work that's going to pay off into perpetuity? And if you start to shift your mindset around that, I think people end up being in such a better place.
It's the investor's mindset,
Yeah.
Instead of being a consumer where you're buying stuff with the money you earned from an hourly or wage or a salary, where you're trading time for money. You're taking that maybe active income and you're buying assets that create income for you.
Yeah.
So you invest once, but you get that money back in return, and it continues more or less in perpetuity.
Exactly. Yep.
I love it. I want to have to read that book. Oh, well, Kirby, this has been an excellent conversation. Not that I'm bragging, but at least I enjoyed the other side of the conversation.
So great.
And thank you very much for coming on, and appreciate what you're putting out, appreciate the impact you're making in our community.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks again.
So take care.